The aroma of roasted turkey and cinnamon usually brought warmth to my heart, but this Thanksgiving, the air felt cold, colder than the November wind rattling the windows of my daughter's grand estate. I had spent 3 days preparing for this dinner. I baked the pies, I polished the silver, and I brought along a gift that had been in our family for 4 generations. I thought this was a day for gratitude. I thought, finally, my daughter Chloe and I could bridge the distance that had grown between us. But the moment I stepped into the foyer, wearing my Sunday best and holding a tray of my famous stuffing, the atmosphere shifted. Chloe didn't greet me with a hug. She looked at me, at my vintage coat and my simple pearls, as if I were a stain on her pristine marble floor. Her husband, Marcus, stood behind her, checking his gold watch, looking bored and irritated. "Mom, what are you doing here?" Chloe whispered, her voice sharp enough to cut through the festive music playing in the background. I stood frozen, the heavy tray of food suddenly feeling like lead in my arms. "It's Thanksgiving, Chloe. You invited me. I thought we were having a family dinner." "That was before Marcus's business partners decided to join us," she hissed, stepping closer so the guests in the living room wouldn't hear. "These are important people, Mom. Investors. High society names. I can't have you telling your old stories and wearing clothes that look like they belong in a museum. It doesn't fit the image we are trying to project." I looked at my daughter, the girl I had raised on a librarian's salary, the girl whose college tuition I paid for by working 3 jobs. She looked like a stranger. "Chloe, I'm your mother. I'm family." She didn't blink. She didn't even look ashamed. "Actually, Marcus and I discussed it. This is family only, and by family, we mean our immediate circle and business associates." "Who invited you, old woman? You need to leave. Now. Before you embarrass me." The room spun. "Who invited you, old woman?" Those words felt like a physical blow to my chest. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply set the tray of stuffing down on the expensive mahogany side table, straightened my coat, and walked out the door without looking back. As I drove back to my small cottage in the pouring rain, the silence in the car was deafening. I thought about the will I had updated just last month. I had left everything to Chloe, the house, the savings, the family heirlooms. I had spent my life building a safety net for a child who just threw me out like trash. When I reached home, I didn't go to bed. I sat at my desk and picked up the phone. I called my lawyer, Mr. Henderson. "Eleanor? It's late. Is everything all right?" he asked, sounding concerned. "I need to make a change, Arthur," I said, my voice steadier than it had been in years. "A permanent change. I want Chloe crossed out of my will. Every cent, every brick of the house, every piece of jewelry. I want it all gone. I want to leave her with exactly what she gave me tonight, nothing." I spent the rest of the night looking through old photo albums, realizing that while I was busy loving my daughter, she was busy calculating my worth. A week later, the news would break. A week later, she would find out that the old woman she kicked out was the only person keeping her lavish lifestyle from collapsing. But as I signed the new papers the next morning, I knew one thing for sure: the Thanksgiving dinner she wanted so badly was going to be the most expensive meal she ever had. The air in the basement felt heavy with the weight of 20 years of silence. As my fingers brushed against the yellowed envelopes, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the damp cellar walls. These letters weren't from my husband, Henry. They were addressed to me, but the handwriting was elegant, slanted, and painfully familiar. It belonged to Arthur Vance. I opened the first letter. My breath hitched as I read the words, "Eleanor, I know you think I abandoned you. I know you think I never cared about the child we shared. But they told me you were gone. They told me the baby didn't survive." My world tilted. For 30 years, I believed Henry was Chloe's biological father. He had loved her as his own, protected her, and given her his name. But this letter changed everything. Arthur Vance, the man Chloe was now desperately trying to impress for money, was the man I had loved and lost before Henry came into my life. Suddenly, the basement door at the top of the stairs creaked open. A sliver of light cut through the darkness. "Mom? Are you down there?" It was Chloe. Her voice sounded different, not the sharp, arrogant tone she used at dinner, but something filled with a desperate, frantic energy. I quickly tucked the letters and the DNA report back into the box and slid the floorboard into place just as her footsteps reached the bottom of the stairs. She was still wearing her expensive silk dress from the party, now stained with rain and mud. "What are you doing in the dark, Mom?" she asked, her eyes darting around the room. "The lawyer said you took something. He said you have papers that don't belong to you." I stood up slowly, dusting my hands on my apron. "What belongs to me, Chloe, is the truth. And what belongs to you is a life built on a foundation of sand." She stepped closer, her face twisting in frustration. "Marcus is losing everything, Mom. Those investors at the table, they aren't just businessmen. Marcus owes them millions. If we don't sell this house and get the trust fund money, they'll ruin us. Do you want to see your daughter on the street?" "You were ready to see your mother on the street tonight, Chloe," I said softly. "You invited me to your home only to hide me in the kitchen. You signed a notice to evict me from the only home I've ever known. So tell me, why should I care about your husband's debts?" "Because Marcus is family," she screamed, her voice echoing off the concrete walls. "No, Chloe," I replied, pulling one of the letters from my pocket, the one I had kept out. "Family is based on truth. Did you know that Marcus has been talking to Arthur Vance behind your back? He didn't invite Arthur for his investment. He invited him because he found out who Arthur really is to you. He's been blackmailing him, Chloe. Your husband is selling you to your own father." The silence that followed was deafening. Chloe's face went white. What are you talking about?" I handed her the letter. As she read the words of the man who had been searching for her for 30 years, the man her husband was using for money, I saw the last of her arrogance vanish. "He knew," she whispered, the paper shaking in her hand. "Marcus knew Arthur was my father and he didn't tell me? He didn't want you to have a father, Chloe. He wanted you to have a bank account," I said. Just then, the sound of a heavy engine roared in the driveway. Through the small basement window, I saw the headlights of Marcus's car. But he wasn't alone. 2 other cars pulled up behind him. Men in dark suits stepped out, and they didn't look like lawyers. "They're here, Mom," Chloe whispered, terror finally breaking through her voice. "They're coming for the box." I looked at the iron box hidden under the floor. It contained the proof of Arthur's paternity and the trust fund that Marcus had tried to steal. But it also contained a secret that Marcus didn't know, a secret about the night Henry and I took Chloe in. "Go to the coal chute, Chloe," I commanded, pointing to the small metal door at the back. "Get to the neighbors. Call the police. I'll handle Marcus. But Mom. Go. As Chloe scrambled through the chute, I grabbed Henry's old wood-turning tool from the bench. I wasn't just a mother or a grandmother anymore. I was a woman protecting her legacy. The basement door was kicked open with a thunderous crash. Marcus stood there, his eyes bloodshot, his tie loosened. Behind him stood Stephen the lawyer and a man I didn't recognize, a man with a cold, predatory smile. "The game is up, Eleanor," Marcus growled. "Give me the box, or we'll find it ourselves after we've cleared you out of here for good." I stood my ground, the tool gripped firmly in my hand. "You're too late, Marcus. The truth has already left the building." The air in the basement was suffocating, thick with the smell of old wood and the stench of Marcus's desperation. He stood at the foot of the stairs, his shadow looming large against the concrete walls. Beside him, Stephen the lawyer looked like a cornered rat, his eyes darting toward the iron box I still held firmly under the floorboard's edge. "I'm going to say this one last time, Eleanor," Marcus hissed, stepping into the dim circle of light. "Hand over the box. You're an old woman living in a fantasy. This house, that trust fund, it's all business. And you're bad for business." I stood my ground, my fingers gripping Henry's old wood-turning tool. My heart was pounding, but my voice was as cold as a winter morning. "You call it business, Marcus. I call it a betrayal of the highest order. You didn't just marry my daughter, you tried to dismantle her soul. You knew who her father was, and you kept it from her just to use it as leverage." Marcus let out a harsh, jagged laugh. "Leverage? It's called a payday. Arthur Vance has more money than God, and he's terrified of a scandal. When he finds out his long-lost daughter is a middle-class housewife, he'll pay millions to keep it quiet. That box is the only thing that proves the connection. Now, move." He lunged forward, his hand reaching for my shoulder, but a sudden noise stopped him cold. It wasn't the sound of the storm. It was the heavy, rhythmic sound of footsteps on the floorboards directly above our heads. Stephen turned pale. "Who is that?" "Chloe is supposed to be at the neighbor's." The basement door at the top of the stairs creaked open, swinging wide with a thud. A tall, imposing figure was silhouetted against the hallway light. He didn't rush, he descended the stairs with a slow, deliberate grace that made the very air in the room feel heavier. It was Arthur Vance. He looked exactly like he did at the Thanksgiving table, perfectly tailored suit, silver hair, and an expression of iron, but his eyes were now fixed on Marcus with a look of pure, unadulterated loathing. "I believe you were looking for me, Marcus," Arthur said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble that echoed through the basement. Marcus stumbled back, nearly tripping over a stack of crates. "Arthur! I didn't expect you to come here personally. I thought we were going to discuss the investment at the office on Monday." "The only thing we are discussing is your exit strategy," Arthur replied, reaching the bottom of the stairs and standing beside me. He looked at me for a brief second, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of the young man I had loved 30 years ago. A silent apology passed between us. "I got a call," Arthur continued, turning his gaze back to Marcus. "A very frantic call from a young woman who had just crawled through a coal chute. She told me everything. She told me about the blackmail, the eviction notice, and the way you treated her mother." Marcus tried to find his voice, his bravado crumbling. "Arthur, listen, it's not what it looks like. Eleanor is confused. She's trying to ruin Chloe's future." "No," a new voice joined the fray. Chloe appeared at the top of the stairs. Her dress was ruined, her face was tear-streaked, but her eyes were clearer than I had seen them in years. She walked down to join us, standing between me and the man she had called her husband. "The only person ruining my future was you, Marcus," Chloe said, her voice trembling but certain. "I heard everything from the window. I heard how you talked about me. I heard how you talked about my mother. You never loved me. I was just a payday to you." Stephen tried to slip past them toward the stairs, but Arthur raised a hand. "Don't bother, Stephen. The police are already in the driveway. And the Bar Association has already been notified of your legal activities tonight." Marcus looked around the basement, realized he was trapped, and his face twisted into something ugly. "You think you've won? That box. I'll burn this whole house down before I let you have it." He made a desperate grab for the iron box, but Arthur was faster. With a strength that surprised us all, Arthur shoved Marcus back against the furnace. "It's over, Marcus," Arthur said firmly. "You've lost your wife, you've lost the money, and by tomorrow morning, you'll lose your freedom." As the distant sound of sirens finally cut through the rain, I reached down and picked up the iron box. I handed it not to Marcus, and not even to Arthur. I handed it to Chloe. "This is your life, Chloe," I said softly. "The truth belongs to you now. What you do with it is up to you." The red and blue lights of the police cruisers danced against the wet pavement outside, casting long, rhythmic shadows across the basement walls. Marcus and Stephen were led away in handcuffs, their faces twisted in a mixture of rage and defeat. The house was finally quiet, but the silence that remained was heavy with the weight of 30 years of deception. Chloe sat on the bottom step of the stairs, the iron box resting on her lap. Her hands were still trembling, but the frantic look in her eyes had been replaced by a hollow, searching stare. Arthur Vance stood by the furnace, his hands shoved deep into his pockets, watching her with a look of longing and regret. "I didn't know, Chloe," Arthur said softly, his voice breaking the silence. "I was told your mother had passed away in childbirth. I was told there was no child. If I had known, I would have searched the ends of the earth for you." Chloe looked up at him, then at me. "And you, Mom? You knew? All this time, you let me believe my father was Henry?" I walked over and sat beside her, resting my hand on her shoulder. "Henry was your father, Chloe. In every way that mattered. He loved you from the moment he laid eyes on you. But there is a part of the story even Arthur doesn't know. A part that is at the very bottom of that box." I reached into the box and pulled out a small, tattered envelope tucked beneath the layers of letters. It was sealed with red wax. "Henry told me to give you this only if you ever questioned where you came from." Chloe took the envelope with shaking fingers and broke the seal. Inside was a single piece of parchment, a handwritten confession from my late husband, Henry. "To my dearest Chloe," the letter began. "If you are reading this, it means the secrets of the past have caught up with the present. I need you to know that your mother, Eleanor, is the bravest woman I have ever known. When Arthur's family threatened to take you away, to put you in an orphanage because you were an inconvenience to their high society reputation, it was Eleanor who chose to vanish. She gave up her name, her family, and her future to keep you safe. I didn't just take you in. We ran away together to protect you from the very people Marcus was trying to sell you back to." Chloe gasped, her eyes widening as she realized the depth of the sacrifice. It wasn't just about a hidden father, it was about a mother who had lived a lie for 3 decades just to ensure her daughter was never treated like a scandal. Arthur stepped forward, his face pale. My family, they did that? My father told me you were dead because he didn't want a middle-class girl and a bastard child ruining the Vance legacy? They were powerful people, Arthur, I said, looking him in the eye. And you were young. I couldn't take the chance that they would take her from me. So I let you believe the lie, and I let Chloe believe the lie. Henry gave us his name, and we built a life of silence. Chloe looked at the letters from Arthur, then at the confession from Henry, and finally at me. The realization hit her like a physical wave. She had tried to evict the woman who had sacrificed her entire identity to save her. She had called me an old woman who didn't fit her image, while I was the very person who had created that image for her. She let out a sob, a raw and guttural sound, and threw her arms around my neck. I'm so sorry, Mom. Oh God, I'm so sorry. I was so blind. I thought I was better than you, but I'm not even worthy of being your daughter. I held her tight, feeling the years of distance finally melt away. It's over now, Chloe. The truth is out. No more hiding in the kitchen. But as we sat there, Arthur cleared his throat. He looked at the trust fund documents still lying on the floor. There's one more thing, he said. The trust fund Marcus was trying to steal, it wasn't something I set up recently. It was a fund my father set up as a settlement to keep Eleanor quiet years ago. She never touched a penny of it. It's been sitting there, growing, for 30 years. How much? Chloe asked, wiping her eyes. Enough to pay off every debt Marcus created, Arthur said. And enough to make sure this house, and your mother's cottage, are never touched by anyone again. But there's a catch. Chloe looked up, wary. What catch? The money is tied to the Vance name, Arthur explained. To claim it, you have to be legally recognized as my daughter. It means the world will know. It means the scandal my father feared will finally break. The room went silent. Chloe looked at me, then at the box. She had spent her life trying to be high society. Now, she had the chance to officially be a Vance, to be the billionaire's daughter she always dreamed of being. But it would mean exposing the very secret I had protected for 30 years. What do you want to do, honey? I asked. Chloe looked at the iron box, then she did something I never expected. She picked up the trust fund papers and handed them to the small fire still burning in the basement furnace. I don't want the Vance money, she said firmly. I'm an old-school walker. And I think it's time I started acting like one. The flames licked the papers, turning the millions of dollars into ash. Arthur didn't look angry, he looked proud. But as the papers burned, a small, black object fell out from the folder Arthur was holding, an object he hadn't seen. It was a key. A key to a safe deposit box in the Caymans that Marcus had mentioned. Wait, I said, reaching for the key. If Marcus was blackmailing Arthur, and the money is gone, then what is this key for? The smoke from the burning trust fund papers hung in the basement air, a bitter incense to the end of an era. Chloe stood by the furnace, her face smudged with soot but her eyes finally reflecting a sense of peace I hadn't seen in years. Arthur Vance watched the last of his family's legacy turn to ash, a strange look of relief on his face. But as I held that small, cold, black key in the palm of my hand, I knew the fire hadn't consumed everything. The Caymans, Arthur whispered, leaning in to look at the key. Marcus mentioned a secret account. I thought he was bluffing to increase his leverage, but this looks like a master key to a high-security vault. Chloe wiped her hands on a rag. If I burned the trust fund, then what is this? Why would Marcus be so obsessed with a key if the money was already in the legal documents? I looked at the key, then at the box. Because, honey, Marcus didn't want the money you knew about. He wanted the money no one was supposed to find. Your husband wasn't just a failed businessman, he was a scavenger. He found a trail that even Arthur didn't know existed. The rain outside had slowed to a steady, melancholic drizzle. We moved upstairs to the kitchen, the very kitchen where this nightmare had begun just a few hours ago. I put on a pot of coffee. My hands were steady now, the adrenaline of the confrontation replaced by a cold, calculating clarity. We sat around the mahogany table, the black key sitting in the center like a dark omen. Arthur, I said, pouring the coffee. Your father was a man of many secrets. He didn't just hide Chloe. He hid the Vance Foundation's offshore holdings. If Marcus found that key, it means he found a way into the family's black box, the money they used to make problems go away. Arthur took a slow sip, his gaze fixed on the key. If that's true, Eleanor, that key doesn't just open a vault. It opens a Pandora's box of every bribe, every payoff, and every dark deal my family ever made. If Marcus had opened that vault, he wouldn't have just been rich, he would have owned half of the city's politicians. Chloe looked from the key to Arthur. And now we have it. We could give it to the police. We could end all of it. It's not that simple, Chloe, Arthur replied, his voice grave. The moment that key enters a courtroom, the Vance name is destroyed forever. Not just the money, but the reputation. Everything I've spent my life trying to build with integrity would be buried under my father's sins. The room went silent. This was the ultimate test. For Chloe, it was a test of her newfound loyalty to the truth. For Arthur, it was a test of his legacy. And for me, it was about ensuring that my daughter was never hunted by the shadows of her past again.